For years, Russia has held a major advantage over Ukraine. Glide bombs that pelt Ukraine in their thousands are being launched from behind the front lines and into Ukraine's cities. Ukraine has been trying to come up with an answer, and now it has one. Ukraine just built something that turns Russia's entire front line into hell. The white flags will start waving. Putin's patsies will be begging to surrender. The Equalizer is here and was built for one mission: punish Russia. What Ukraine now has on its hands is a weapon unlike anything that it's built before. And when we say built, that's an important part of what makes the Equalizer so vital. A weapon that was 17 months in the making and is a product of the Brave One network that enables Ukraine to invest in companies producing weapons that can be used against Russia is here. Ukraine's Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov has already hailed the weapon as a game changer. Ukraine's standoff munitions game just received a huge boost. And the best part about all of this is that the Equalizer isn't some sort of conceptual weapon that will take months to deliver to Ukraine's forces. It's tested, it's ready, and it's going to ruin Russia. The Brave One X account makes that clear, as well as providing us with some basic specs for the new bomb. Ukraine had no guided aerial bomb, Brave One declares. Now it does. Then comes the information that we need to know about the Equalizer. DG Industry, a Brave One participant, has completed all required trials and declared the weapon ready for combat after 17 months of development. The bomb carries a 250-kilogram warhead, hits targets dozens of kilometers behind enemy lines, and was designed from scratch, not copied from Western or Soviet systems. There's a lot to unpack here, and we'll be digging deeper in a moment, but the key piece of information is that this is a new type of guided bomb that Ukraine has built domestically, which means it isn't tied into any sort of foreign supply chains. It hits hard, can fly to the Russian near rear, and has been designed by Ukraine, for Ukraine, to terrorize Putin's soldiers on the front and beyond. Oh, and there's more. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has already placed an order for the first batch of these new bombs, and pilots are training in their use as we speak. Combat deployment is imminent, Brave One declares. Russia's soldiers have no idea what's coming for them. What Ukraine has developed here is a weapon that brings it to parity with Russia in an area of the war where Ukraine has consistently lagged. That's why the Equalizer has the name that it has. According to Business Insider, the official Ukrainian name for the new glide bomb is Vyrovnyuvach, which translates to Equalizer in English, and it's been designed to be launched from almost any of Ukraine's fighter jets, including the Western airframes that Ukraine has received from its partners. That leads us nicely into what we know so far about the Equalizer. We have the weight 250 kilograms. Ukraine has also said that the weapon will be able to fly for several dozen kilometers. We can assume from this that the Equalizer will be able to wreak havoc somewhere in the 50 to 100 kilometer range. We'll get more details once the weapon is deployed and it's being dropped on the heads of Russian soldiers. However, these basic specs don't tell the full story. They make it sound as though the Equalizer is a basic glide bomb. It isn't. The clue to that lies in the claim that Brave One makes that this weapon isn't a copy of any of the systems that the West has provided or any of the glide bombs that Russia has used against Ukraine. That indicates a technical difference between the Equalizer and the types of similar bombs that have come before. A Russian glide bomb is a relatively simple weapon. Russia straps a wing kit onto a Soviet-era fab bomb that was never meant to glide, and it has a weapon. Those kits aren't especially accurate. They certainly aren't designed to make a dumb bomb into a precision weapon. But what they do give is the Russian fab bombs more range, which, when combined with some basic guidance systems, allows them to strike deeper into Ukraine's territory and somewhere close to their targets. That's fine for Russia. It doesn't care if it misses its target as long as its glide bombs cause damage to something Ukrainian. But for Ukraine, an imprecise weapon is never the answer. The Equalizer isn't a wing kit. It's a purpose-built weapon that was designed from the airframe up. No wing kit is involved, though the bomb does have wings. This isn't the transformation of the old into something more functional. It's an entirely new weapon that has been designed to overcome Russian electronic warfare and signal jamming, so that it can ram 250 kilograms of explosive fury into command posts, fortifications, logistical nodes, and any other enemy target that Ukraine identifies behind the front lines. So we know the Equalizer is purpose-built. It's also cheap. Much cheaper than the Joint Direct Attack Munition Extended Range or JDAM-ER kits that Ukraine has been receiving from the United States. JDAM-ERs are more similar to Russia's glide bombs than they are to the Equalizer, as they are essentially wing kits strapped onto dumb bombs. And while not expensive in the grand scheme of the weapons that Ukraine uses, they still come with a solid price tag. In a May 6th report, Defense Express revealed that a new batch of 1,532 JDAM-ERs that Ukraine is purchasing from the US is going to cost $373.6 million. That gives us an average unit cost of $243,864 to work with, which covers both the kits themselves and all of the extras that come with the JDAM-ER, such as fuses, components, and other associated services. That price tag matters for a simple reason. The Equalizer will cost about a third of the JDAM-ER for Ukraine. Taking this per unit price tag as given, that means a single Equalizer, with all of its components, will cost Ukraine approximately $81,300 to build. For that, Ukraine essentially gets 3 weapons for the price of one, a guided bomb with similar specifications to the JDAM-ER at a third of the cost. Ukraine needs to pinch the pennies as much as it can. As the BBC revealed in March, the Ukrainian government is dealing with a $45 billion hole in its budget, due almost entirely to the country having to fund its defense against Russia. A $105 billion loan from the European Union is going to help cover Ukraine's budgetary shortfall, but it doesn't change the fact that Ukraine needs to find as many ways as possible to spend less while still inflicting damage to Russia. The Equalizer does just that. If Russia is going to use cheap glide bombs, Ukraine is now building its own better versions, and it's doing it just as cheaply to create parity in one of the most dangerous areas of the war. So what else do we know? According to SOFX, Ukraine has focused on making the Equalizer as versatile and easy to use as possible. The new guided bomb requires a preparation time of less than 30 minutes, making reactive sorties possible. As soon as Ukraine identifies a target, Equalizers can be loaded, and a fighter jet can be up in the air in as little time as it takes for a pizza to be delivered. SOFX also reveals that the Equalizer is an all-weather weapon and that it can be launched at any time of the day. That's huge for Ukraine, as much from a psychological vantage as an operational one. Of course, it always pays to have a weapon that can hit its target come rain or shine, but once the first Equalizers start dropping and Putin's patsies learn that they are never safe from its destructive force, they'll be terrified. Even the threat of an Equalizer strike coming can be enough to disrupt logistics and interfere with Russian command. We may even see Russia's rear logistical operations and command structures withdraw so that they can get out of range. That will have a clear impact on Russia's frontline troops, which are already being ravaged to the tune of around 35,000 casualties per month, as they attempt to push through Ukraine's drone-infested kill zones. But now we come to the big question: how will Ukraine launch the Equalizer? We hinted at the answer earlier in the video. This is a guided bomb, so it will naturally be dropped from fighter jets. As for which types of jets, we got one answer in the video that Brave One released on X to accompany its announcement of the new weapon. That video shows an Equalizer being released from an Su-24 Fencer attack jet, which immediately tells us that Ukraine is making its new weapon versatile enough to ensure that its Soviet-era airframes can get in on the game of ruining Russia's rear. That's smart. Jets like the Su-24 are vulnerable to Russian air defenses when they have to fly sorties around the front lines, but when they're tasked with getting up into the air and unleashing a guided munition from dozens of kilometers away, they face less risk, and the bomb itself does all of the work. It's a tactic that Russia has used to great effect against Ukraine for years. Now, Ukraine is throwing the tactic right back in Putin's face. The same video also provides us with a little more insight into how the Equalizer operates in practice. Unlike glide bombs and other guided munitions, it appears that the Equalizer's wings are extended immediately after release. There are also lugs on the underside of the bomb, which suggests that the Equalizer will mirror Russian glide bombs in the sense that it topples over to assume the correct trajectory before the wings deploy. However, those wings being deployed instantly suggests that the Equalizer is faster at achieving this task than a Russian glide bomb. That's important. The less time spent toppling and righting itself for the Equalizer, the more time the wings have to take effect and extend the range of the bomb. Large cruciform tail fins on the rear of the bomb will also likely play a role in stabilizing the Equalizer, both in the early stages of toppling and when it's flying toward its target. Let's come back to the airframes for a moment. Due to Brave One's video, we know for certain that the Su-24 will be compatible with the Equalizer. That's a good start, but what about other fighter jets in Ukraine's arsenal? The odds are pretty high that other Soviet-era airframes will be compatible with the Equalizer. The Warzone, or TWZ, points out that Ukraine has used Su-27 flankers and MiG-29 Fulcrums as carriers for Western-supplied guided munitions, including the JDAM-ER, mentioned earlier, along with the small-diameter bombs and French-made hammer bombs. Based on the Equalizer's size, both of these airframes should be capable of carrying it, so we can safely assume that Ukraine has either worked that compatibility into its other Soviet-era jets, or it's in the process of doing so. The same goes for the Su-25 Frogfoot attack jets, which have delivered hammer bombs before, so will likely be able to send Equalizers flying in the direction of Russian positions. As for Ukraine's Western airframes, they're likely to be compatible as well, though a little more work needs to be done. In its report on the Equalizer, Business Insider claims that the bomb can already be launched from Ukraine's F-16 and Mirage fighter jets. The caveat is that additional certification is needed before these jets can launch the Equalizer in combat. Still, that shouldn't be hard to attain, especially if Ukraine has already demonstrated compatibility between the Equalizer and these jets. Assuming that the certification goes through, that means Ukraine gets 6 Mirage airframes and around 80 flight-worthy F-16s that can launch the Equalizer. There are also rumblings that France will provide Ukraine with all 26 of its Mirage jets, as Euromaidan Press reported back in January. So we may see Ukraine get even more aerial firepower if that happens. Versatility is vital for Ukraine. Right now, it's looking like practically every fighter jet in Ukraine's arsenal will be able to launch the one weapon that Russia hoped Ukraine would never be able to develop. So that's all we know about the Equalizer so far. There is still a certain air of mystery about this new weapon. Brave One has just turned up, dropped a bombshell on the world, and now it's letting the news stew. But when we say an air of mystery, we mean that literally. The Equalizer may be tied to another project that Ukraine has been developing, and there is still plenty that we don't know about the weapon. Before we dig into all of that, this is a quick reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you're getting valuable insight from the channel, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a video. Let's head back to 2024. September 2024 to be exact. That's the month that footage of a mystery weapon located under the wing of a Ukrainian Su-24 fighter jet appeared. This is the very same type of jet that rattled off the Equalizer in the Brave One video, and the mystery weapon that appeared in September 2024 bore more than a few similarities. A Telegram post that published the video said that it was dated to August 2024 and that it showed an Su-24 conducting flight tests of a new guided aerial bomb. Beyond that, we didn't know much. The Status 6X account speculated that the mystery weapon could have been an early version of the Palyantsia drone-missile hybrid that Ukraine was developing at the time. A TWZ report from the time took a closer look at the mystery weapon, noting that it had a nose, mid-body and tail that seemed to point toward the use of a wing kit that could be used to convert a dumb bomb into a glide bomb. But after this initial appearance, the mystery weapon seemed to disappear. Could the Equalizer be a revamped version of that mystery bomb? If it is, Brave One and Ukraine aren't saying anything. TWZ has reached out for comment to learn if there is any sort of connection between the weapons. The same outlet also points out that timelines don't quite match up. The Equalizer officially began development in December 2024, which is several months after footage of the mystery Su-24 bomb emerged. But that doesn't necessarily mean the original bomb wasn't part of the development process. It could have been a prototype that Ukraine cancelled or used as a base from which to develop the Equalizer. We may never know. And Ukraine is wise not to share anything about the development of a new weapon that it has designed to bring pain to Russia. Other mysteries relate to the Equalizer itself. For instance, we still don't know if the final version of the Equalizer will have any sort of power plant or engine. It seems likely that it won't. An engine would make the Equalizer easier for Russian air defenses to detect, which is a clear detriment. However, the option might be open for Ukraine to create a variant of the Equalizer that is similar to its mid- and long-range kamikaze drones, or somewhat in line with the hammer bombs, which have a rocket booster. Perhaps something like this is already in the works, but Ukraine wants to test the Equalizer without a power plant to see if it can keep costs down and still do plenty of damage. We also don't know a huge amount about the Equalizer's guidance system. Business Insider says that the bomb uses modern guidance algorithms, which will improve its targeting and accuracy. However, that vague description doesn't reveal much. TWZ speculates that we may see a combined satellite navigation and inertial guidance system in play, though how that gels with the Equalizer's reported ability to overcome Russian jamming and electronic warfare isn't explained. Again, we're going to have to wait until the Equalizer is deployed to get our answers. Russian soldiers will learn about the full capabilities long before we do, when they're being punished with the hellfire that it promises to rain down. Now that we've revealed as much as we know about the Equalizer, here's where things get serious. Ukraine really needs a weapon like this, and there are several reasons why. Let's start with the name that Ukraine has chosen, because that reveals a lot about what makes the Equalizer so important. We mentioned earlier that one of the clear advantages that Russia has had over Ukraine, at least for the last few years, is its use of glide bombs. The numbers alone tell the story of Russia's reliance on these dangerous weapons. In April, the Kyiv Independent reported that Russia had broken its own record for the number of glide bombs that it had launched against Ukraine in a single month. This March had seen Russia fire off 7,987 of these types of guided munitions, which was 1,500 more than it had launched in February. That previous month had been a record too. Russia smashed that record in March. What this tells us is that Russia has been ramping up its usage of cheap glide bombs. Ukraine has been coming up with ways to counter them. Jammers are in play, which help to send the Russian glide bombs off course. But when the Russian goal is simply to cause as much damage with these bombs as possible while using missiles and drones to conduct more precise strikes, the effectiveness of the jamming technique is brought into question. It's also not as though Russia was launching very few glide bombs in the past. In 2024, Russia dropped almost 40,000 glide bombs onto Ukraine, averaging out at 109 per day. The first 11 months of 2025 saw Russia hit 44,000 glide bombs for an average of 130 per day. There has been constant scaling up in this department. March's record numbers break down to about 257 per day. Russia clearly sees the benefit in its glide bombs. What makes these guided munitions so deadly is that they're cheap to make, and they allow Russia to convert fab bombs weighing up to 1.5 tons into more deadly weapons. The BBC offered an interesting comparison back in 2024 when glide bombs started making headlines. It pointed out that Russia only needed to spend about $30,000 to turn a Fab 500 bomb into a glide bomb. That new glide bomb could deliver over 200 kilograms of explosive power to a target. In contrast, a Russian 152mm artillery shell is loaded with 6.5 kilograms of explosive. Almost 31 times the destructive force for a fairly modest price is something that Russia jumped at the chance to gain, and we see that in the number of glide bombs dropped in the years since. What the Equalizer does is provide Ukraine with a weapon that is similar to Russia's glide bombs, and may yet be more accurate and resistant to jamming. It's a weapon that is likely to be launchable from most of Ukraine's airframes, and it finally allows Ukraine to fill a gap in its arsenal that Russia has been able to exploit for years. Parity could be achieved. For every glide bomb that rattles a Ukrainian position or city, an Equalizer could be delivered that devastates Russia's near rear. All of this assumes that Ukraine can mass-produce the Equalizer, and that's a point we'll be coming back to. Let's assume that production isn't going to be an issue and Ukraine is going to build thousands upon thousands of Equalizers. Beyond creating parity with Russia on the glide bomb front, what this means for Ukraine is another major benefit. The Equalizer is a homegrown weapon, so Ukraine won't have to worry about supply chain issues and disagreements with foreign powers when trying to maintain its mid-range strike capacity. Any domestically sourced and produced weapon is a boon for Ukraine because of this very reason. And we only need to look at the roller coaster that often represents Ukraine's relationship with the US to demonstrate that. Earlier, we touched on Ukraine's purchase of around 1,500 JDAM-ERs from the US when covering the cost of the Equalizer. But it's not just the money that comes into play here. Think about the numbers when compared to Russia's glide bomb figures. About 1,500 JDAM-ERs covers less than a week's worth of the guided munitions that Russia sent hurtling into Ukraine in March. In other words, there will always be supply chain issues at play when Ukraine is buying weapons from foreign powers. Does that mean Ukraine will stop using Western tech? Of course not. Western weapons are still invaluable to Ukraine, but they're always subject to stockpile and supply chain issues that don't exist for weapons that are being built on Ukraine's territory. The past year or so has provided plenty of examples of supply chain issues. The JDAM-ER purchase is actually a positive example of Ukraine's relationship with the US, despite the admittedly limited numbers. Rewind to March 2025 and US President Donald Trump ordered that all military aid to Ukraine would be paused. That decision was made following a spat between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House, and it showed that the relationship between Ukraine and one of its most valuable Western partners was fragile. The Trump administration ended the pause soon after, but that wasn't the end of supply chain issues. In July 2025, the BBC reported that the White House had once again cut off some weapons deliveries to Ukraine, reportedly to put America's interests first. And on May 2, 2026, the Kyiv Independent reported that the US was delaying arms shipments to Europe, with the likelihood being that this would affect deliveries to Ukraine. Those delays are likely a result of America's Operation Epic Fury in Iran, and the impact that operation has had on American stockpiles. The point here is that relying on foreign aid is unstable for Ukraine. One day it has a shipment planned to arrive and can make plans based on that. The next day the shipment is delayed or aid is paused and everything has to change. For Ukraine, the Equalizer brings stability. It allows Ukraine to determine how many of these new bombs it gets, when it gets them, and how it uses them. Oh, and the how it uses them aspect is another big benefit for Ukraine. Back in August 2025, the Wall Street Journal reported that the US had quietly created a new approval process that dictated how Ukraine could use ATACMS against Russian targets. That system, the outlet claimed, forced Ukraine to work through multiple layers of approval, heading to a final decision on usage being made by US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Granted, this approval system related to missiles rather than guided munitions like the JDAM-ER, but it shows that the US can, at any time, prevent Ukraine from using weapons that America supplies against Russian targets. Even if Ukraine is able to get permission to use US-made weapons, The fact that it has to go through such a process in the first place creates delays. Immediate strikes are no longer possible. Retaliatory strikes are difficult to execute, as forced delays in Ukraine's attacks give Russia the chance to prepare defenses. All of these permission woes go away with a weapon like the Equalizer. Ukraine built it. Ukraine dictates how and when it's used. There are no middlemen or extra steps that have to be taken. A target can be identified and then blown to pieces within 30 minutes, based on what we know about the Equalizer's prep time. That's a huge advantage for Ukraine, and it means that domestic production can cover the gaps left by changes in other nations' foreign policies, allowing Ukraine to keep up the pressure on Russia. Another benefit lies in overcoming Russia's air defenses in Ukraine. One of the key advantages that guided munitions like the Equalizer have over drones and missiles is that they are more difficult for Russian air defenses to detect. As Defense News points out, the bombs can be launched from several kilometers behind the front lines, which means air defenses can't track the jets that Ukraine will use to launch the Equalizer. And as for the bomb itself, it only appears over the target during the last few seconds of its flight due to it being launched from a standoff distance, which gives air defense systems practically no time to react. Russia is also in a strange place right now when it comes to air defenses. Ukraine has spent a year or so whittling away at those defenses, especially in the occupied territories. According to the Kyiv Independent, the period between June 2025 and March 2026 saw Ukraine conduct 492 strikes against Russian air defenses, and there have been more since. Those systems have to be replaced, often using systems located elsewhere in Russia or the occupied territories, which creates gaps for Ukraine's missiles and drones. Now add the Equalizer into the mix, and you get a new strategy that emerges. Ukraine could use its Equalizers to pepper regions where it knows that Russia has air defenses in the near rear, perhaps taking out radars and systems in the process. More gaps get created. Missiles and drones can hit targets with even greater frequency, and due to the inexpensive nature of the Equalizer, the bomb can also accompany missiles and drones to take out other Russian military assets. The bomb multiplies Ukraine's mid-range firepower, and that will always be terrifying to Russia, especially during a time when middle-range drones are already leading Ukraine to targeting the near rear with greater intensity. There is only one thing that could hold the Equalizer back, and that's something that we've touched on before: production. We simply don't know enough about how many of these guided bombs Ukraine can produce. Euromaidan Press points out that just how much the Equalizer can change the battlefield maths in Ukraine will depend on how many of these new bombs Ukraine can produce each month. Repeatable manufacturing is a must if Ukraine is to come close to matching the numbers that Russia outputs. Right now, it's too early to tell how many Equalizers Ukraine plans to build each month. They still need to be deployed in combat before Ukraine can run the necessary cost analysis needed to come up with those numbers. But if the Equalizer delivers on its potential, we can see production ramping up in short order. And when it does, Ukraine will have a homemade weapon it can use to turn the front line and near rear into a living hell for Russia. It's not like the Equalizer is the only weapon that Ukraine is introducing onto the battlefield in 2026. The Sky Carrier is another, and it blends the old with the ingenious ability of Ukraine to adapt what was into something completely new. Ukraine now has a terrifying new drone hunter, and you can find out all about the Sky Carrier if you watch our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to the Military Show so you never miss our analysis of the latest weapons that Ukraine brings to the table. And thank you as always for watching.